not ideal, but this recording or this presentation is being recorded. And so for the people that don't make it or that still have questions afterwards, you will be able to review this. But I also want to be respectful of your lunch hour. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And those that get are here a little bit late will have the opportunity to see what they miss. So before we get started, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Rachel MacArthur. I'm a policy analyst for the Criminal Justice Commission, and hopefully you all are here to hear about the specialty court grant program for 2023 and 2025. We're going to go over the application materials today. They were released last Friday. And so just want to get into a little bit more detail. There have been quite a bit of changes, and so want to give you all the opportunity to hear about those changes as well as ask any questions. So before we get started, I just want to take a second and have one of my colleagues, Will, introduce himself. He is part of the research team. So Will?
Thank you, Rachel. My name is William Ash Houchin. You can call me Will, and I'm a research analyst here at the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission, and I provide research and data support for the Specialty Court Grant Program. Thank you, Rachel.
Absolutely. Thank you, Will. Yeah, so we are going to get to a piece on data that is a newer piece, and so Will is here to answer those questions and navigate that part. So super excited to have Will on this team and also kind of moving forward with that data piece. So let's get started. So after the end of the last grant cycle, we at CJC reached out to you all for feedback and wanted to get your all's opinion on what worked, what didn't work with that grant cycle, and use that information to kind of move forward and build something that made sense for you. And so there was an overwhelming emphasis on the need for consistency with this program, transparency, efficiency. And so we have tried to set the foundation with this grant cycle, keeping that feedback in mind. And so we have attempted to build a more reliable foundation, not just for this grant cycle, but moving forward. We want to make sure that this grant program becomes a little bit more predictable for you all. We recognize there's been a lot of turnover. There's been a lot of changes every grant cycle. And so we are taking this opportunity based on your feedback to kind of set this foundation and have something within this program that is a little bit more predictable, transparent, more efficient, and easier to navigate for you all. So we have divided this up into two parts. There's two parts to this application. There's a preliminary application and then there's a final application. The preliminary application is what was released last Friday. So there's a narrative section to the application with some questions. There is some required documentation, and then there is a piece on data collection as well. So that is what is due on the 17th of April. And then the final application will include the budget request that you all are used to submitting. That will also look a little bit different, but we're going to walk you through that. So just kind of if there's anybody new on this webinar and just wants information, I just wanted to quickly cover this. Eligible applicants are counties that with existing Oregon Circuit Court specialty courts. Okay. And we do have an implementation round, but for this particular application round, it has to be existing courts. Applicants have to use the Oregon Specialty Court Management System, which is SCMS. I'm sure all of you are quite familiar with that. And also have a treatment provider that accepts the Oregon Health Plan. This is the timeline. We are in the beginning of this, but like I said, it was released last Friday and the preliminary application is due April 17th. So all of the documents that you got on Friday, if you did receive them, are due on the 17th. Those documents, which I'll be going over, are also available on our website on the Specialty Court page. So if you didn't get them, they are available to download. And then there will be in late May a grant review committee meeting with funding recommendations that will come out of that. When we schedule that, we will communicate that out and let you all know. There will then be the final application with another review by the grant review committee. And then July 26th is the commission meeting where they will have final approval based on the funding recommendations. So any questions on this timeline? Okay. I did forget to mention that you all can raise your hand. I know the chat is available as well if you do have questions. So if I'm just talking and you want to interrupt me, please do so. We want to make sure you get the information that you need. So these are the materials that you should have received on Friday. And like I said, they are available on our website if you did not. So the grant administration guide, which I will cover in just a second, the solicitation, primary application that includes the narrative questions, the list of required documentation where you will upload that into SM Apply, and then we will have data that CJC will pull from SCMS. And then the final application will include an opportunity for you all to respond to feedback. We understand that April is not the end of the biennium, and from April to July or April to June, there are things that may change within your programs. And so we want to give you the opportunity, if there is a document that was missing in the initial preliminary application, to be able to submit that or to be able to directly respond to any feedback that the grant review committee may have had. So there will be an opportunity to do that in case something has changed within that time. And then we will also be asking for a budget projection sheet from you all. So the grant administration guide is a new document. It's been designed to replace the grant management handbook, and a couple changes to it. We have gotten feedback from grantees across all of our grant programs for a need for more clear language and transparency across all of our grant programs. And so we attempted to use this guide as a way to standardize processes, implementation policy, all of that across all of the grant programs. And so we removed some of the things that you may be used to seeing in an RFGP, as well as a grant management handbook, and put this together in a document that we hope is a little bit more clear and concise, and easier to navigate. So sections 2 through 4 just address general policies. These apply to all of our grant programs. And I just want to note the list of unallowables, which I know has been very frustrating and confusing in the past, has changed slightly. So please take note of that. We kind of broke it up a little bit to try to provide some more clarity in terms of when there is a need to reach out to us for questions as to whether or not something is an unallowable use of funds. So please take a look at that if you haven't already. And then section 5 describes all of the grant programs with eligibility requirements for those, as well as funding priorities. And then the last section is any additional state or federal regulations that you may have seen in the grant management handbook. We've kind of just moved those over so they're in one place. The goal for this document is that we update it yearly rather than by biennium. And so it says 2023. This is currently what we have for this year. We understand that we are in session, and so if something changes at the end of session, we will be updating it if needed. But the goal is to have this updated yearly so that we can move a little quicker with some of the changes that may be happening rather than just relying on a document that may or may not make sense to you all. So like I said, please, for this sake, look at the unallowables. It has changed slightly. So Jennifer, do you have a question?
I do. I was just looking at the list of allowable expenses, and one of the big differences I noticed is that it now says food or drink except for client stability and per diem in accordance with Oregon statewide travel policy. Can you elaborate on that client stability piece?
Yeah, so this is something that we tried to standardize across grant programs because there in other programs we have noticed that there's a need for sometimes for food to be given to participants or clients for just for them to have stability. So it's not necessarily a grocery card to go buy groceries, but it's they need food in this moment to eat or to, you know, coming along with housing or some sort of emergency situation. And so that is something that is now allowed in that circumstance if it's providing that participant with stability in that moment. That's something that we will allow going forward. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it certainly helps. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay, so the solicitation is a little bit different as well. We tried to take the very dense RFGP and remove as much of it as we could so that you all could navigate this a lot easier. And so the solicitation, you're going to see this across all grant programs as well. You'll have the grant administration guide and then the solicitation, which actually has the program specific information that you need. And it will be hopefully a lot more clear and transparent in terms of what you actually need for that program. And so such things as eligible applicants, duration of funding, availability of funding, application requirements, so what's actually needed, and then the timeline. So again, this is something that was sent out on Friday. It was in front of the application questions, and it's pretty straightforward. So, Odd, do you have a question?
Thanks. Sorry. Yes, just going back to the prohibited costs, you addressed food and drink. Can you go to the line above that just regarding entertainment, including amusement, social activities, and any other associated costs? And the example I would want to provide is if we are building a program for incentives and we have gift cards, the way I would read that is that you couldn't buy a gift card, say, to a movie theater. Is that correct?
That is, yes. So yeah, this is one of those, this is kind of why we broke it up with generally not allowed, but you can have written consent. And so what we're doing on our end is attempting to keep track of the things that we are allowing and not allowing in those circumstances, and have a consistent answer for you all. So it's a little bit tricky, this kind of, because we know that there's one-offs and we understand that there's certain circumstances within each program, right? Not just especially program across the board. And so, yeah, entertainment is one of those that is a little squishy. And so I would just encourage you before, you know, buying those gift cards or whatever, just to reach out to one of us so that we can kind of be consistent in our answer rather than have like a yes or no in that circumstance, or an overall yes or no. Sorry.
Is there a rationale for that kind of a rule? I mean, when you're talking about antisocial companions and pro-social leisure activities, and you have judges that are, you know, encouraging people to do some more post-social things, why would that be something that would be written into the grant in the first place? I'm not sure I understand the logic.
Yeah, so CJC is also held to a standard of what we are allowed and not allowed. And so a lot of it has to do with the type of funding that we get. And so some of those that are hard nosed or a little bit have some exceptions is because we get federal funding. And so we have a standard that we also have to follow. And so that's where that comes from, is we're held to that just because of the types of funds that we get.
Thank you.
Yep. 2G, did you have a question?
Yes, hi Rachel. Can I clarify with regard to the timeline or the duration of the grant, that it runs from July 1 of 23 through December 31st? So that's a 2.5-year period instead of the standard 2 years that would end June 30th of 2025.
Yeah, so that was actually my next slide. So hopefully I will answer that question.
Thank you.
In this next slide. Absolutely. Yeah, so one of the things that I did want to touch on, available funds. We don't actually know yet what is available in terms of funds for this program, and we probably won't know until we near the end of session. So once we do know that, we will communicate that out to you all, so you have a understanding of the overall funds that are available for this program. I did want to note, though, the project period typically for this program has been from July 1st. So this past one was July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2023. We have actually extended that project period by 6 months. And so this next project period is going to be July 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2025. And what that is going to allow you all to do is have 6 more months to spend down your funds that you get. So it may alleviate some of that stress that you're probably feeling right now as you're trying to spend down funds before the end of June. What that means is there will be some overlap between this grant period and the grant period in 2025. And so you will be asking for funds going into the new biennium. You will have funds left over from this biennium. And we will work with you to make sure in terms of reporting, in terms of what quarter you're on and what biennium, we'll make sure that that is very clear. But the project period is going to be extended for this biennium. So before I get to the financial reporting, any questions on that?
Yes, can I ask a follow-up question to that, Rachel?
Sure.
Given that the grant period of performance will cross over into a new biennium with a new stream of funding going into 25-27, in the current budget, should we also account for in our budget requests the 6 months from July 1 of 25 through December 31st of 25?
For this budget?
Correct. So for the
Yes.
extra 6 months, should we include costs that will be incurred for those extra 6 months, or should we wait and depend on the next cycle of funding that will come through for 2025 through 2027?
I mean, my advice to that would just be with whatever your program needs. For those extra 6 months, it's really just an opportunity for you all to spend down your funds, which I know has been, it's a really tight cutoff for this program. And so we're just giving you the opportunity to spend down your funds. I don't know what the specific courts need or the counties need in terms of funding and their requests. And so it can be either or. If there is going to be an overlap, though. And so it really just kind of depends on the needs of that court, but it just allows for a little bit more flexibility for the program to be able to spend their funds. So what that means is we are actually going to be doing advance payments in lieu of RFRs. So instead of tracking what you're spending and then reporting it and then getting reimbursed, we are actually just going to be giving you money you can spend, and then you'll report what you've spent. And so RFRs will no longer be a thing. And as we get closer to this, the contract process will be changing, as well as financial reporting. We will make sure, I'm going to be doing one of these again to walk you through that process and what it actually looks like. But I kind of just wanted to give you all a preview in terms of what that's going to look like for going forward with no RFRs. Any questions on this? Because this is all new. Okay. Okay, so I just quickly want to go through some application materials just to give you in a little bit more detail, just to give you an idea of any expectations. So the primary application is the narrative. And there, I think, are 14 questions. Each one has a very specific word limit. There is some required documentation that we're going to ask you to upload into SM Apply, and then we will be pulling data. So the narrative section is focused on the adherence to the Oregon State, or I'm sorry, the Oregon Specialty Court standards. And so we've designed these questions in a way that will allow you to highlight what you do well and to also highlight and provide details about any sort of challenges on implementation of these standards. Okay, so we are setting a benchmark by focusing on the adherence to standards. And as we go move forward with the grant review committee, this is going to be a large piece, this adherence to standards. And so I know that when we are, filling out applications and trying to tell people how we're doing and what we're doing, there's an inclination to make things look as good as they can. And we want you to do that. We want you to highlight what you do well, but we also want you to be very clear and intentional and deliberate in your assessment of how your program is doing. And the reason why is because we want to make sure that these funds are going to fill those gaps or meet those needs or provide resources that you may or may not have. And we want to make sure that we're getting it right. So please be very intentional about the way that you are answering these questions. There is a question about sustainability and there is a question about other funding sources. For that reason, right? We want to make sure that we are providing funds where they need to be provided. Like I said, there's going to be word limits. It's not the same word limit per question. We did highlight that so you all know how much you have to answer a question. And we made this, and so it's actually going to require collaboration from the entire specialty court team to answer these questions. And so it's a little bit of a different process, but we feel like establishing this foundation and focusing on these standards is a really good way to continue to move this program forward. So rather than having you explain all of the processes, we did try to lighten your lift a little bit. And so this is just a list of required documentation. In SM Apply, there will be a task for each one of these. And so you'll just upload it and we'll check off that task that you have. Like I mentioned earlier, and we'll mention at the end, if you don't have one, we will provide the opportunity for the final application to upload a document if you have it at that point. So any questions about this list? Kate, saw a hand and then it disappeared.
Hi, Rachel. Sorry. Yes, Kate
That's
Kerrigan,
okay.
Washington County. I had a couple of quick questions. With the MOU specifically, we have a current MOU that's been signed and in effect for quite a while, and we're working to update our MOU. Are we able to upload multiple copies if we want to provide both of those because we're making hopefully big strides with our new MOU?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would upload the one you have.
Okay.
And if the changes that you're making change your program in any specific way or any significant way, you can upload that at the final application.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does, yes. And
Yeah,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, if there's small changes and it's just kind of a process thing, I think you're okay. But if it is a significant change and it will, answer any sort of questions that the grant review committee may have, then I would upload it in the final application.
Okay. And are we able to upload additional letters of support beyond, or will there be a specific place for just one document from the presiding judge, one letter of support from the PSCC?
Currently, there's only 2 spaces just because there's so many documents that are required to upload. So we just left it for those 2. But if there's kind of an overwhelming call for multiple, then we can maybe accommodate that. But for right now, it's just those two.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Rachel, you got a question?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. I just wanted to clarify with all of these, the program documentation, we've seen the coordinators, thanks to your heads up on all of this, already really hustling to pull their stuff together and make some improvements. And I just wanted to clarify that your interest this time around is less content specific with the documentation, but rather you just want to verify that they have the documents.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's your all's job to make sure to look at the content. We just want to make sure that you have it, just so that it's, again, this is something that is in the standards, and so we're just making sure that it's there. Rather than have you all explain all this, we just want to see if you have it. So.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So this is also a new piece. We are going to try to establish an analysis, a process to analyze these applications in a more quantitative way going forward. And this will help with overall evaluation of the programs. It will help with your all's lift and requirements with this program. And so we understand that this is not something that has been done in the past necessarily. And so we're going to start small. We are just going to be collecting capacity, number of participants, and completion rates. And this is something that CJC staff will be pulling from SCMS. And so this is not something that you'll be required to submit on your end. We do encourage you to be putting stuff in SCMS so that we have an accurate depiction of these things. And we will just be going through Q7. Is that correct, Will? Of this past biennium? Sorry, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so it'll just be quarters 1 through 7 of this current grant cycle that we will be collecting and pulling information from. So this requirement will expand going forward. This is something that we are going to start relying on a lot more. And when that time comes for that discussion, we will make sure that we communicate it out to you all in terms of expectations within this upcoming grant cycle. So for right now, we're just looking at capacity, number of participants, and completion rates. Okay, so the application analysis. This is essentially the part where the grant review committee is going to do what they've been asked to do. And so I do want to just say this process for the specialty court program has always been a bit murky. It's always been, there's not been a lot of transparency from us to you all. And so we understand that there is a bit of anxiousness, a bit of frustration with this process. And so we are attempting to make it a lot more efficient and a lot more transparent for you all, so you can actually get an understanding of how this process works. So this is something that beyond today, I will be continuing to communicate to you all of how this works and what it looks like. First, this is going to be a public meeting, which it has not happened before. So you all will be able to see this process as it unfolds. We are going to have a meeting with the grant review committee to set everything up before they even look at your applications. That will be a public meeting. You all will be able to see that and understand what the grant review committee is going to be doing. And then again, you'll be able to see and hear their recommendations as they happen. So we hope that transparency will give you all a better idea of not only what we're trying to do, but their expectations of you all when we give you feedback. So we are going to be looking at staff. CJC staff is going to be looking at adherence to guidelines, completeness of the application. So there may be times in between April 17th and the grant review committee where we're reaching out to you just to get clarification. What we're trying to avoid is the GRC having to make inferences about your answers. We tried to build these questions to avoid that. But again, we want to make sure that you are able to give all the information that you need to give, and there's a completeness to your answer. And so we'll spend time possibly reaching out to you to get clarification on those. The grant review committee is going to consider the narrative portion, the documentation, the data, and the adherence to standards. Okay. And then in the preliminary part of their meeting, they're going to then provide guidance on budget requests that will meet the needs of each court. So this process is a pretty big shift. It's going to require a pretty big shift of mindset. In the past, it has been where you all have asked for as much as possible and hope that you got something. And there hasn't been a lot of consistency in what's funded, what's not funded, decisions made. And so we're trying to have adherence to standards be the focal point of their feedback. And in doing that, in looking all of this and triaging these pieces that we're asking you to submit, the grant review committee is going to be providing feedback to fill those gaps and provide resources to specific courts. And so this might make people a bit uncomfortable because it is a lot different than what's been done in the past. But in saying that, I've been here, I think through one application process and kind of on the tail end of another. And every time we've had an increase in the number of courts that have applied for funding through CJC. And yet the funding hasn't necessarily kept up with that. And so we have to be cognizant of using those funds in a specific way to address gaps, to provide the resources for each court and not necessarily be able to fully fund those courts. And so we're going to ask that your projected budgets align with the grant review committee feedback. We are going to ask you to prioritize, but we also are going to ask you to take that feedback and request what you need, rather than requesting everything and hoping you get some. So this is a bit of a change in the approach to funding requests. So I'm going to pause right here. Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, and like I said, as we get closer to this, you know, our goal is to be as transparent as possible. This is something that I will continue to talk about. If you have questions and you want to ask me privately, please don't hesitate to reach out. And then the final application is the opportunity to respond to feedback if needed. There will be a place. If you look at the documentation that was sent out, we did include the final application in there, so you can see what's going to be expected. It is a budget projection sheet, as well as an opportunity to respond to any specific questions in the narrative, as well as upload any documents if needed. So after this, the grant review committee will then meet again to look at this based on feedback they provided in the preliminary round, and then we'll make their final recommendation. I did want to make note of the projected budget sheet. We did standardize this across all grant programs. The budget categories are in the grant administration guide along with definitions. And so we will work with you to make sure what you're requesting fits into the correct category, because it does look different than previous budget sheets that have been asked of you all. So this will be something that you'll have the opportunity to download and then upload into SM Apply, rather than actually filling out budget requests in SM Apply. So it's just going to be that budget sheet. You're going to be able to download it, fill it out, and then upload it in SM Apply. So if you notice as well, there are 2 budget sheets. And so there is one for county allocated funds as well as OJD allocated funds. And the OJD portion only has 3 budget categories: personnel, supplies, and travel and training. So make sure that when you download it, that you fill out the 2 tabs rather than just the first sheet. Okay. And as we get closer to this final application process, I will be doing another webinar specifically on the budget. So we wanted you to have an idea of what it looks like, you know, through this application. But specifically, I will be walking everyone through this as well as we get closer. So, but it will look different. So. That is all I have. I just wanted to maybe take a bit of time. I know we've got a little bit of time, and open it up to any questions or anything that you all may be concerned about. I see Denise.
Hi, Rachel. I am Lane County's LIPSIC coordinator, and I think I saw in the materials that the LIPSIC needs to be a submitter, which is in addition to just a letter of support. Can you clarify what the expectations of the LIPSIC's role is ongoing versus the applicants? Because I just want to be clear so I can communicate to my body what this is, the intent is.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so we require the county to be the applicant, and not like an OJD coordinator or something like that. And so for the application itself, when you go into SM Apply, there's an owner and there's a collaborator, and the owner of that application has to be somebody from the county. You all can decide who that is. Usually it's just a point of contact for me, to communicate, particularly with like financial reporting and things like that. Did you say you were from Lane County? Is that right?
I am, and usually the sheriff's office is our lead on that, and so the LIPSIC, just we communicate through them and the treatment court coordinator to keep, you know, the LIPSIC involved or just up to date, not really implementing. So I just wanted to get clear if something changed with your expectations for the LIPSIC.
No, it's just we just need somebody from the county, whoever you're representing. I think Debbie Holler has typically been for Lane County. If that continues, then that's just fine. We just need somebody that is a county person to be the owner of that application and actually hit submit on reporting and stuff like that.
All right, thank you.
So, yep, absolutely. I think Kathy was next.
Okay, hi Rachel. Kathy from Washington County. Just had a question about the budget request. So let's just say, you know, I asked for 3 different pots of money for services that our drug court doesn't have that meet the standards. Is it going to be seen favorably if all of a sudden I find a drawer of cash so that I can say, hey, we can fund half of this? That's all I can find in my drawer of cash, and but we just need CJC to help us a little bit with the rest. Is that going to be seen favorably, or should you know, because sometimes I can pull a few little bits of money here and there, but not fully fund something. So just wondered about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we just want you all to be intentional about requesting what you need, right? And so it's why we're looking at other funding sources and things like that. So we want to make sure that we are addressing your needs and filling those gaps in terms of resources. So favorably or unfavorably, I don't know if that's the correct term, but just make sure that when you are doing that, that you are requesting what you need. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Chris? I think who's next?
Hi. I just have a quick question. If you have more than one program, do you need separate applications for each program, or do you, in the narrative, break it down? I'm assuming that 2 applications.
Yes. So yeah, so this is one of the reasons why we have attempted to make this a lot more efficient, because we recognize that counties have multiple courts, right? And so as it stands right now, we do require an application for every court. And so yes, you'll have to do this for as many. And if you have issues in SM Apply of creating those different programs for the application, reach out to us and we can walk you through it. But yeah, that was one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we got, was making this lift for you all a lot smaller, because there are multiple applications. So
great. Thank you for clarifying.
Yep, absolutely. Jennifer, I think is next.
Hi, everybody. Jennifer, Multnomah County DISC. So as far as projecting the numbers, are you basing the budget on previous participants served from SCMS data for this biennium? And I'm asking because I think we're expecting our census to increase. So I wasn't sure if we have like the COVID census of we didn't have, we only served about 40 people this last biennium. That was like our cap. But now that COVID's over, we're getting, more participants. Will that affect how you look at what our court may need as far as the budget goes?
Yeah, it's going to be a piece of it. The data piece will be something that the grant review committee considers as we kind of get a clearer picture of what the grant review committee is going to expect from us in terms of information to present to them. We'll be communicating that out to you. But yeah, I mean, it is going to be something that is considered. It's part of that piece, but it's not everything that's going to be considered. So. Any other questions? Rachel.
Thank you. I think just one other one for me. So, historically, if I was applying for this, I would be thinking about how to explain the necessity of my budget asks in the narrative portion of the budget. But so recognizing that those two things are separated.
Go back.
I'm just thinking through if I was an applicant this time around when I'm submitting my narrative application and describing how we're meeting standards or areas that we're struggling, I would probably want to note in there perhaps where like current CJC money is supporting part of how we're reaching a best practice so that the committee understands how your funds are helping us to reach best practices currently.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'm just thinking there might be a little bit of a disconnect in that maybe it looks like we're doing fabulous, and so the recommendation may be that we need or get less money, but really that's only thanks to the support we've gotten from CJC historically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there would be an issue with mentioning that. What I will say is to not include any sort of numbers that include that. So we don't want any sort of budget anything in the narrative, but it can be something where you mention that CJC has supported this in the past. This is also why we are asking if you are struggling with meeting a standard, we need to know that. And I know that is a little uncomfortable to do in an application where you're asking for funding. We recognize that, but it's also something that we need to know so that we are making the most educated decision that we can make when we're analyzing these applications. So yeah, it could be something that you mentioned, but we just ask, don't break it up into personnel or contractual or anything like that. We don't want to go there in the preliminary application. And it's not something that we'll present to the grant review committee if it is in the application. That's not something that will initially be presented. So
thank you.
Yep. Any other questions, comments? Like I said in the beginning, this will be recorded. And so if you all want to review this again, please do so. I will also be sending out the PowerPoint presentation to you all, so you can have that, and just in case. And then as we move through this process and this timeline, we will be communicating out to you upcoming meetings with the grant review committee so you can attend. Like I said earlier, we will be doing a webinar on the budget piece as well, because I know that is also new. And CJC staff may be reaching out to you after the application is due to get clarification on some questions. So also, if you have any issues with SM Apply, I know sometimes it can be a bit counterintuitive, please reach out to us and we'll walk you through that process as well. So. Okay, if there are no other questions, I'm gonna let y'all go and enjoy your Tuesday. And we'll be in touch with the next process or the next step in the process. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Rachel.
Yep.
And Rachel.